3 years ago, one of the video series that made me popular and garnered my initial few thousand subscribers was index errors. I went through all the index rules of 10th edition to find the many problems. For 11th edition I thought, oh, there'll be no need, the codexes are compatible. It's pretty easy to make a compatibility document to get the rules working in 11th edition. Turns out, for Games Workshop, this is very difficult. Although the core rules are out, we essentially exist within a live beta test of Warhammer 40,000's 11th edition, which will truly be ready around the end of September, just in time to change once more as the Space Marine Codex and the Orc Codex come out. The rules in the core book will change, the app which gives you more rules will update, and the Codex rules will get scrambled up some more. So I present the many funny and thought-provoking errors, mistakes, and potential oopsies that Games Workshop has made going from 10th edition to 11th edition. I was going to aim for 41 errors for the 41st millennium, but I found 40, then 50, then 60, and then many lots of errors. Oh my, I've grouped a lot of them together. Let's have some fun. Enough fun to make you want to subscribe. I'm not here to insult the rules writers, but the whole faction pack system of updates is a half-hearted copy and paste. And now they need to go through the rules and find the problems and fix the problems. Maybe they were waiting for me. Maybe they knew. And this isn't a complaint about the things we wanted but didn't get but should have had, like the Deathwatch Terminators not getting updated with their Lightning Claws and Thunderhammer stats that match the Assault Terminators that the Space Marines have. Some of these weird rule interactions I'm going to bring up may be intentional. We don't know. Something that made this harder is that some rules are not in the core rules or the PDFs and only exist in the app. This makes searching for rules much harder than it should be because there's no Control F function. You can search the rules, but it won't come up with that exact word. I searched the word you for the rule you, and it doesn't come up. Now I don't know who you are. I am Christian von Carmian. Let's have fun. This first section is all about forgotten interactions. Rules that don't do what they should do, rules that do something that they already do, or rules that don't work. So the Hounds of Morkai, they are very resistant to psychic attacks. They can pick an enemy unit within 12 inches, they have to take a battle shock test. Okay, we still get the battle shock test part. If they fail the test, they are stunned. While they are stunned, any psychic attacks they make are at -1 to hit. What do psychic attacks do, everyone? Oh yeah, psychic attacks ignore modifiers to hit. Shame. Great ability to have, but that second half does nothing. That's a great start. Then we get the many times that the benefit of cover comes up with the benefit of cover. Kaleidoscopic Tempest Stratagem and the Hex Warp Thrallband. It gives you stealth, which as we know is the benefit of cover. But if you're in your flow of magic, you also get the benefit of cover. Nice! They don't stack. You have the benefit of cover, you have the benefit of cover, you have the benefit of cover. It doesn't matter how many times you have the benefit of cover, the most the enemy is going to be is -1 ballistic skill. The Leagues of Votann have the Persecution Prospect detachment, which has a stratagem called Dispersed Formation. It gives you stealth and the benefit of cover. So twice over, you get the benefit of cover. Thanks Games Workshop for giving me two things, making me look up a second thing, see that it's the same as the first thing, and then confusing me. At least that's how it feels as a new player. Am I missing something? What's the actual benefit of this second thing? They haven't changed this, at least updated on the app to make it easier to read. The Tyranid Vanguard Onslaught. There's Chameleonic as an enhancement. It gives you stealth and the benefit of cover. Great. Same thing. The Skitarii Hunter Cohort. That gives your Skitarii Infantry, your Iron Striders, gives some things stealth. The Sakarans already have stealth. They get the benefit of cover as well, which does nothing more for them. A different bonus would have been nice. But Games Workshop hasn't really looked at balancing the codexes going from 10th edition to 11th edition, just making sure the rules are compatible, which they not necessarily are. There are a lot more of these benefit of cover plus stealth interactions. I'm not going to go through all of them. At least it's a free ability. You don't have to pay for it, unlike some of the stratagems. So we go to the Imperial Agents, that well-balanced, well-looked-after faction, They have a stratagem that gives one of their assassins a 6-inch lone operative. But according to the rules appendix, your lone operative can never be better than 9 inches. Ah. In that same detachment, the ensnaring trap stratagem mentions the charge bonus, which isn't a thing that exists anymore. It used to be that you would get fight first. So now we don't know if this stratagem, which is essentially Heroic Intervention's best version for 1 command point. It refers to not getting the charge bonus, but there is no charge bonus mentioned in the rules for 11th edition. So is this meant to be a Heroic Intervention, but you don't fight first, which is why it's 1 command point? Whereas when you heroically intervene in 11th edition, you get fight first because you made a charge move. The Tempestus Aquilons have a deep strike of 3 inches. All other units are limited to 6 inches, and the general rule in a balance patch that said, okay, if you have any 3-inch rules, make it 6-inch rules, that hasn't translated into 11th edition. That's a rule that doesn't exist anymore. Every faction was meant to have their unit changed. The Tempest Aquilons have not got that change listed. They can still deep strike just over 3 inches away. Another forgotten rule? The Neuro Tyrant was updated to be able to lead zone tropes. That was a 10th edition thing. That hasn't been moved into 11th edition, so the Neuro Tyrant cannot lead zone tropes anymore. I don't know how it appears on the app. I haven't bought the Tyrannid Codex. If it's there on the app, let me know. If it's not on the app, it probably should be. But we don't know if it's intentionally dropped or Games Workshop forgot to copy it over. Sometimes it's more obvious that rules should have been copied from 10th edition to 11th edition. An Orc Warboss can have the Slippery Git enhancement. That lets them infiltrate and have stealth, and the text refers to them leading commandos. The faction pack doesn't let them lead commandos. 10th edition allowed them to. Junith Erewhita is flying and is a mounted character. When they are alone, the Chorus of Condemnation detachment rule doesn't work on them, because that only applies to flying infantry. But when Junith leads an infantry squad like Dominions, that now works with the Chorus of Condemnation. The squad shares all keywords, so they're infantry and mounted, and they're fly, so it has at least got infantry and fly. Now it can spot the enemy and reduce their hidden range. And it also means that they can take to the skies. The whole unit loses 2 inch on their movement value, and then Junith can move over other models. Please, Games Workshop, just make her ground infantry. Yes, she would be able to go in a Rhino again, like back in the index of 10th edition, but that was funny. This is a bit more confusing. The Kazakin Sergeant's Power Sword was removed as an option. Now it seems that when changing a paragraph, the rules writers can see what it was before and what they want it to be, but they don't realize that when they add something new, it deletes everything of the rule. So we get the Metamorphs of the Gene Stealer cult. Now they have a surge move, but it comes in 2 parts. If the unit has any number of hand flamers, they surge d6. If the unit has no hand flamers, so it's all auto pistols and flags and characters, then it automatically surges 6 inches. When their rule was updated to match the current surge move rules, that second paragraph disappeared. And I think that was a mistake, because hand flamers are not a separate option that costs additional points. So I think this is another case of a previous patch not being carried over. Another example of this, updating a paragraph, but it actually deleted all the previous paragraph. The Sanctus has this cloak, which says no snapshots can be fired at them. Previously, this was only an ability if you took the knife, not the sniper, whereas the reactive move is still limited to having the sniper rifle. They missed out copying and pasting the words, if equipped with a knife, you have this ability. As it stands, whether you have a sniper rifle or a knife, the enemy cannot fire snapshots at you. And some rules don't work. The Custodes gunship has an ability to make a normal move, and as it flies over an enemy, they lose the benefit of cover, and they may take some mortal wounds. This is an aircraft. Aircraft do not make normal moves. This ability will never trigger. So it would need to be reworked to, at the end of your movement phase, then you pick an enemy. They lose the benefit of cover and may take some mortal wounds. That'd be fine, but it needs updating. In other cases, a stratagem isn't that stratagem anymore. The Reductor Saboteur has an ability that allows them to use the grenade stratagem for 0 command points. There is no stratagem by that name existing in 11th edition. Oh, they have the grenade keyword, and anyone with the grenades keyword can use the explosive stratagem, but this is explicitly calling out the grenade stratagem. Experienced players who have been through 10th edition may know, oh yeah, Games Workshop meant to say explosives instead of grenades. New players will look at that and see, there is no grenade stratagem. There is no link on the app to that stratagem. What does it do? What even is this? The Navy breaches have the same issue. Send out the servo skull to drop a bomb on the enemy. No, not a bomb. A grenade, which isn't a stratagem. The Death Corps of Krieg combat engineers say they also get a free use of the grenades, which should be explosives. And there are many more of these grenades explosive keyword things. Another example is the Krieg Engineers Legends version, which was made from the old Imperial Armor kit. Same problem. Grenades for free, not explosives. Even if a mild amount of confusion from a few players can be avoided, it's worth updating these words. The Chaos and Imperial Knight Lancers have an ability to use the tank shock stratagem for 0 command points. This stratagem does not exist anymore. It is crushing impact. Some people will absolutely read this as go back to the 10th edition rulebook and use that stratagem, not the different crushing impact stratagem, because tank shock did not have the potential to cause mortal wounds to yourself. Crushing impact does. What you obviously do to make this work is gonna seem different to different people. There is no such thing as common sense, because everyone's understanding of common sense is very different. There are some stratagems and enhancements that still mention Overwatch. That technically works. They cannot pick you as an eligible target to fire Overwatch at, but it should have been updated like so many others to say the enemy cannot fire snapshots at you. Overwatch is snapshots, but so are several other stratagems. Commissar Yarrick was recently updated in a balance patch, or sort of balance, an emergency, oh no, this is far too powerful, he's doing far too much stuff, we need to tone him down a bit. One of his abilities can be used when an enemy unit is set up or moves within 9 inches of him, not 8 inches as it is for many other similar abilities in 11th edition. An Imperial Guard regiment within 6 inches of Yarrick can fire at the enemy, but only hitting on 6s. This absolutely sounds like it should be snapshots. As it isn't snapshots, you can do things like re-roll hit rolls of 1. Snap shooting, you cannot re-roll hits. With Yarrick's ability, which isn't snap shooting, but is kind of like snap shooting and probably should be snap shooting, you can re-roll all the hit rolls you want. And some poor staff member's gonna walk into the office and be told, hey, did you update Commissar Yarrick? Yes, I did that a month ago. Great. Vampire says it should be changed. Do it again. And off they go to fix that datasheet, or resign and not be replaced. One or the other. At least Overwatch still exists as a stratagem in 11th edition. Many other stratagems refer to this nebulous reinforcement step of the movement phase, something that does not exist anymore. In the Genestealer Occult Brood Brothers Auxilia, there is a dark network. You use this at the end of the reinforcement step. There is no such step anymore. It should be used any time in the movement phase that an enemy unit makes an ingress move within 12 inches. Because you're not limited to setting up your reserve units at the end of the phase, you can set them up at any point, which is really useful because it stops you forgetting at the end of the turn, oh yeah, I was meant to do that and now I've started shooting and now we've got to go back to the movement and put a unit down. And then you can have fights over it, which you shouldn't do, you should just let people do it. But getting to set up your unit any time in the movement phase means you don't need to have a stratagem that works exclusively in the reinforcement step because the reinforcement step doesn't exist. Drop pods, when do they arrive? It's in the reinforcement step. And it shouldn't be. Perhaps it isn't just a step, it isn't just a phase. It's a whole thing. The Emperor's Children have still not been added to the Horus Heresy Legends options for Space Marines. This rule was written at the very start of 10th edition, when there was a Codex World Eaters, or Index, for World Eaters, Thousand Sons, Death Guard, Chaos Space Marines, but there was no Emperor's Children Index or Codex. There were just a couple of units in the Chaos Space Marine Codex. The lack of this rule means they cannot take a lot of Horus Heresy units that exist for every other Chaos and Space Marine faction. It should be so easy to add a bullet point because you don't even need to add a couple more units on the app, because they're Legends units, and even though Legends units are meant to come to the app slowly, a bit at a time with each codex, it would be a nice extra quality of life thing for Emperor's Children players, something that should have happened when their codex was released. So don't be under the impression that Games Workshop has only recently started messing up and not adding rules where they should have rules. Some rules are just neglected, some rules are completely absent. There is no unaligned units pack. The Zote, the Amble, the Spindle Drones, the Fortifications. Some of these models are still sold. They don't have rules in 11th edition of 40k. That's a whole faction pack that's missing for the unaligned units. Sometimes an FAQ or errata has been copied over and it didn't need to be. Copying and pasting can be very complex work sometimes. The Vessels of Wrath detachment was redone, and its detachment rule Wrath of Khorne gives you extra attacks or extra AP on your characters that are not epic heroes. It's now a little 1 detachment point detachment. There is an FAQ to ask that if Angron is destroyed, can you still use the detachment ability? And the answer is yes. 2 unrelated things have just happened, but there's an FAQ to let you know that the detachment continues to work for your other characters which it already worked on. It has nothing to do with blessings anymore, so what does this FAQ do? What's it there for? It was copied over when it shouldn't have been. A lot was lost from the AdMech. The AdMech was probably the faction that had the biggest rework in 10th edition. Their index came out and was terrible. Their codex came out and was pretty terrible, and so loads of things were added to the balanced data slate and their errata and FAQ to update them and make them better. Tech Priests, Belisarius Call and Castellans had Doctrina Imperatives. Now they don't. Rostalker's Razors lost their 2 damage. The Onager's Eradication Beam had its strength increased to 10, but it doesn't specify if that's focused or dispersed. It's only supposed to be dispersed. And it has its original sustained D3 shots. Call doesn't have mobile, so he can't go through walls. That's an update that should have come from the core rules of 10th edition. It only needs a single keyword adding. And maybe not an oversight, but definitely the result of 11th edition rules. The Cybernetica cohort has all of its stratagems work in the command phase. Because you can only use 1 stratagem on a unit per phase, you cannot add more than 1 of these stratagems to a unit. The AdMech rework has not been carried over to 11th edition, and unless there's going to be a new rework, they've lost a lot of their power. Not as much as a whole game mode, Combat Patrol, just generally. All but the most recently sold Combat Patrols have been stripped out, so anything that was sold in 9th edition and a lot of 10th edition is gone, and it seems to be by choice that none of them from the White Dwarf have continued. The Combat Patrol companion book doesn't really tell you how to play Combat Patrol, and there doesn't seem to be a way to play the missions. Previously, your primary and secondary mission were baked into the Combat Patrol. Each Combat Patrol wanted to do something specific. The number of times you did that gave you so many victory points. What are the missions? How do you score victory points in this game mode? I can't find it on the app. There are terrain layouts on a 44 by 30 inch board, but there's no goals. No ways to score points are mentioned in the Combat Patrol you pick, only a disposition. Are you meant to play with the mission deck and do a primary and secondary mission from that? That may end up being quite difficult. We also don't know what level Combat Patrol is meant to be. Is this considered incursion? If it's its own Combat Patrol level, then the Genestealer Cult army rule as shown in Combat Patrol does not work, as there is no level smaller than incursion for using resurgence points and cult ambush markers. Oh, and even if it did, the Combat Patrol rules don't tell you how many resurgence points each unit is. That is not under the Combat Patrol army rule for the Genestealer Cult. And the Genestealer Cult have it worse, because their Combat Patrol Ridge Runner has no guns. It fires its missiles and its stubbers as melee weapons. Whoopsie. So let's move on and talk about the vehicles. This generally comes around who does and doesn't have the frame keyword. The frame keyword is where you measure from. If it doesn't have a base, or even if it does have a base, you should measure things from the model. Most of the Eldar tanks don't have the frame keyword to measure from. They use their tiny flying stand. This is a tiny thing underneath a Falcon grav tank, and so from the base to the tip of the wings, yeah, that's just about 2 inches. You can just get into engagement range with someone there, but the person behind, who is definitely within 2 inches of the wing, isn't actually in range to fight them because you don't measure from the hull, you measure from the base. Or it can be weirdly different. The Doomsday Ark doesn't have the frame keyword. They use the tiny flying stand base. But the Ghost Ark that's made from the same kit does have the frame keyword. The Adeptus Sororitas Repressor doesn't have the frame keyword and has no base. We would be able to look at the tournament base size guide, but Games Workshop doesn't include legends in the tournament base size guide, suggesting they are excluded from tournaments, but the faction pack also includes legends as matched play. That suggests they can be included. And we have the event packs from Games Workshop which do not mention excluding legends. Clarity on what the legends tag even means this edition would be greatly appreciated. The Imperial Guard Hippogriff and Centaur don't have the frame keyword. Dark Eldar aircraft have lost hover as an ability that they didn't have in the first place. Good that we're gaining a keyword and then losing a keyword. And even if they had it, it doesn't do anything for aircraft because it means you don't reduce your movement by 2 inches when you take to the skies. Aircraft don't take to the skies because aircraft don't make any kind of move apart from ingress moves. They turn up on the battlefield, then at the end of their opponent's turn, they leave. They never do any other kind of movement. The Storm Wolf, which is the Space Wolf gunship, has retained hover, had its movement dropped from 20 plus to 14, like the Storm Raven, because it's meant to be a thing that turns up and can move around and fly on the battlefield, presumably because it's not meant to be an aircraft. However, it still has the aircraft keyword, so regardless of the change to its movement, it has to follow the aircraft rule. Turn off from rapid ingress, shoot, and then leave at the end of your opponent's turn. All they had to do was get rid of that aircraft keyword, but because it's Legends, it may not get another update at all in this edition. What we know about Legends is Games Workshop hasn't changed their points and hasn't given much thought to their rules. Now, one of the big rules that's different in 11th edition to 10th edition and causing a lot of problems is splitting on death. In 10th edition, when a unit was destroyed, it was the bodyguard and also the character, and if both were destroyed at the same time, they split into 2 separate units and then both were destroyed. In 11th edition, from the start of the game, they are a single unit for all the rules purposes. This is a problem for the Genestealer Occult Army rule, which doesn't work very well, because you can only use the Genestealer Occult Army rule to bring back a unit if every model in the unit had the Cult Ambush rule. None of the character models have the Cult Ambush rule. So if you start the game as one unit of 11 models, 10 Acolytes and 1 Primus, there is no option here to bring back 11 models. And you cannot use your army rule on that unit that was destroyed, because there was a model in that unit that didn't have the Cult Ambush rule. There needs to be something like the Unending Waves for the Tyranids. You use it on the unit based on how many of a certain kind of model the unit started with, and then the unit goes into a Cult Ambush without character models. It would be nice to know if enhancements on the unit also continue onto the new version. Under the current rules they do, but only if it was an upgrade to the unit, not an enhancement on a character. The Necrons have an FAQ about returning characters with reanimation protocol. That's still here, saying they don't split apart on death, which they wouldn't. So the Necron army rule seems very overpowered when it comes to precision. You precision kill a character, and then the Necrons regrow that character first. There's no need to use a stratagem to bring back the character, because they'll be the first priority to come back with the reanimation protocol's army rule. We have to accept that for the moment a lot of factions do not have a working army rule, with a lot of uncertainty about how they're meant to work. Currently, the Adeptus Sororitas do not get as many miracle dice as they used to. In 10th edition, when a unit was destroyed, it split on death, so you get 1 miracle dice for the Canoness, 1 for the Hospitaller, 1 for the Battle Sister Squad. In 11th edition, you get 1 miracle dice. Is this loss of miracle dice intentional? Is it another way of hurting the Battle Sisters? I see that we have to pay for melter-guns where no other faction has to pay for melter-guns. Melter-guns are the weapon that we use to fight and kill anything on the battlefield. Having a cost for that is unfortunate. Not necessarily an error. I think it's very much intentional, but it's unfortunate for us. Splitting on death maybe should exist in some form. The Orc Boys have an FAQ about them as a bodyguard, referring to splitting units on death. And because units don't split on death, the Hallowed Martyr's Divine Intervention stratagem has trouble. You return the last destroyed model when the unit is destroyed. So if precision kills a character, that isn't a destroyed unit, so you can't use the stratagem. When the last of the bodyguard is destroyed, the last destroyed model would be a bodyguard model. You wouldn't bring back the Hospitaller, you would bring back one Sacrosanct. This needs updating to say when a character model is destroyed, they come back. The Necron Protocol of the Eternal Revenant has the correct wording that should work for the Sisters. The effect of that Divine Intervention stratagem really comes down to the timing. So let's discuss beginnings and endings. It's awkward if you want to cause battle shock to the enemy in the command phase. Take the Inquisitorial Agents of the Imperial Agents and their Tome Skull ability. This is something you use at the start of the command phase. The ability is used, my Battle Sisters take a Battle Shock test. Then we move on to the Battle Shock step, and any unit that is Battle Shocked can take a Battle Shock test to recover. So I get to test a second time immediately to remove the Battle Shock, which severely nerfs these abilities. Especially if you had an ability used at the start of the command phase, which has modifiers on the first roll, and then your opponent makes a normal Battle Shock test immediately after, which could pass. So abilities like the Subductor Squad's Nuncio Aquila, already it struggled to do anything, now it has less of a chance to do anything. These need to be updated to say, in the command phase, because then they would be used in the ability step of the command phase, which is after the main Battle Shock step. The Tyrannid Shadow in the Warp ability appears to work correctly for this, because it doesn't say at the start of the command phase, it's just in the command phase. So it will go in the ability step. Or in reverse, something that should happen is like the Neuro Tyrant's Neuroloid ability, because it doesn't help Tyrannids to pass Battle Shock tests. You use it in the command phase, so it'll go in the abilities step of the command phase, and you pick some Tyrannid units within 18 inches, and until the start of the next command phase, the selected units are considered to be within Synapse range. One of the big benefits of Synapse is you get to roll Battle Shock tests on 3d6. However, this comes after the Battle Shock step, and it stops working before the next Battle Shock step. There are other benefits to being in Synapse range, but if this was moved to the start of the command phase, it would work better. Same for the Adaptive Optimization stratagem in the Subterranean Assault. A Morlock or Trigon gets Synapse, it will at least increase their strength by 1, as it will for friendly Tyrannid units within 6 inches, but it's not going to help with Battle Shock tests in the command phase, whereas previously it did, and that seemed to be its main intention. Starting and endings, very strange. We see it a lot more on different abilities. They should have an endpoint, but they don't. One of the enhancements, which is quite expensive, is the Hagnuomnomnifex for the Adeptus Sororitas. You upgrade a sister to become a hag. Once per turn at the start of a phase, you can get one of these bonuses. That is once per turn, not per battle round, and there is no endpoint. It is not replacing an ability you have, it is not changing the ability you have, it is not a limited time ability. You get that ability. So halfway through Battle Round 3, after we've had 5 player turns, you will have all aspects of it. Is this intentional, or should it stop when another one starts? Because one of the things that Games Workshop's FAQ comes back with when you send them an email saying, "Hey, I've found many problems with this. You might want to fix them, please." They say, just use the strict wording as it's written, even if it doesn't sound right. Okay, it's an expensive enhancement, so maybe I will get all 5 abilities on all of the time. Then again, one of the responses you get from that automatic reply email says to look at page 360 of the Warhammer 40,000 core rules. The new core rules are not that big, because they do not contain all of the core rules. Games Workshop is very desperate for you to sign up to their Warhammer Plus and then get access to the app. And while Games Workshop staff are trying to fix all of the problems with the launch of 11th edition, they are adding new units, like Caiaphas Cain, who can have an invulnerable save of 2+, unlike, say, the Adeptus Sororitas Canones. there is no end step mentioned for that 2+ invulnerable save, and as a Legends unit, it's unlikely to be fixed. At the start of the phase, once per game, you can have a 2+ invulnerable save that lasts, well, I guess the whole game. The timing can also be very weird for stratagems, not just unit abilities or enhancements. In the Xenocult Masses detachment, there is a stratagem that is like Armor of Contempt, but it has different wording to Armor of Contempt. Is it intentionally different to other stratagems that do the same sort of thing? They end when the enemy unit has finished their shooting. This stratagem says range attacks that target your unit are -1 AP until that unit has attacked. By using comparative logic and the wording of the stratagem that it targets the neophyte unit, the -1 to AP lasts until the neophytes shoot. It's probably not meant to be that way, but under strict wording, that is how it is. Or with a change of timing, we can have some nearly useless stratagems. In the Brood Brothers Auxilia, there's a suppress and overwhelm stratagem. You use it in the shooting phase, and enemies cannot target Genestealer Cult units with Overwatch. Overwatch happens in the movement phase, which is already passed. But this stratagem technically does another thing, which allows you to reroll charge rolls for the Genestealer Cult units, so it still does something. But like all the rest of the stratagems in the Brood Brothers Auxilia, it's not a good stratagem. The whole detachment needs to be reworked. Please. In 11th edition, you may have heard that we are no longer fighting over circular objective markers, even though in the rules you can still continue to fight over circular objective markers. Terrain areas are the objective markers. This is how we use abilities like Objective Secured on the Cadians and on the Intercessors. You touch an objective, it stays as your objective. The Death Guard have an ability that if they can get control of an objective, everything within 3 inches of that objective is within contagion range, and that 3-inch range will only expand as the game continues. That is most of the battlefield very quickly if you touch that big central objective, because we are assuming that all of that terrain area is an objective marker. Maybe that wants to be fixed. Maybe it's totally fine. But that's a detachment rule. Detachment rules come under the list building section of this video. There are inconsistencies. Is it intentional? Is it not intentional? The Black Templars Bastion Task Force is 3 detachment points instead of 2 detachment points that it is for all of the other Space Marines. This is the only time that a detachment is different points depending on which faction/sub-faction is using it. So it may be an error, as Games Workshop has made no mention of it in any of their Warhammer community articles, which of course are totally trustworthy and a great source of information. The Bastion Task Force is very good for the Black Templars, so it would make sense if it was 3 detachment points instead of 2, but it may not be intended to be that way. A lot of the errors with list building come from the app. The app is where the rules exist now, so this is another source of errors. If there was a PDF copy of the list building where we could see how it's meant to work, then I wouldn't be so harsh. But in the list building, you can attach a lieutenant and an ancient to the same unit, even though both of them are support characters. You are not meant to be able to have more than one support character leading a unit. Characters can be so confusing. The Veiled Blade detachment is an especially confusing one because that is where you have epic heroes, but they have enhancements. They are in fact forced to have enhancements, but when you add them to the detachment, it doesn't add in the assassin's extra points, nor does it give you the option to add them in. I would be happy if we didn't have the enforced plus 40 points to have grenades. The grenade stratagem, which does not work as a stratagem, inflict mortal wounds on a 3+ instead of a 4+. No wonder the app cannot make it work, so that you can have the grenade stratagem apply. It's not even free. But that's a complaint from 10th edition, not 11th edition. The worst detachment in the game. And there are some contenders, mainly among Imperial agents. Far too many points for these enhancements. Like with the Veiled Blade detachment, some of the issues are from 10th edition moved into 11th edition. There is a Thousand Sons Defiler that is marked as being Death Guard keyword. They have their own Defiler. they don't need to sometimes borrow the Thousand Suns version. Nurgle just seems to take things. The Herald of Slanesh, it's green coloured, like it's meant to be for Nurgle. But that's a colour thing, that shouldn't matter. But points can be tricky. The Custodian Guard with their Pyrite Spears cost more for the 4th unit onwards. They are not battle line. You can only have 3 of them. But good to know that if you desperately wanted to break the rules and have a 4th one, then it costs more points. It's pretty obvious what's happened. Games Workshop has confused one kind of Custodian Guard for another kind of Custodian Guard. Like that Lieutenant got confused between supporting a unit and being a leader for the unit. Perhaps something that's also weird, for the Imperial Guard, none of their characters are marked as support. Everything remains as leaders. So you can't have a Commissar and a junior officer in the same unit, even though you could and should be able to do that. Commissars not being support is odd, but as we get to keywords, Commissars are still a problem. Commissar Yarrick, Commissar Graves, they don't have the Commissar keyword, nor does Caiaphas Cain, who is a Commissar, not a Commissar. It matters to have these keywords, because anything that triggers on a Commissar isn't going to trigger on Commissar Yarrick. You can see it best with the Daka rig, which was described as a character on Warhammer Community. It isn't a character, so it can't take enhancements or be the army's warlord. It isn't a mech, but it is a big mech. Those are different keywords. If you look at a regular orc big mech, it has big mech as a keyword and mech. So if something ever affects mechs but isn't meant to affect big mechs, this is why we have different keywords. You can see it on the Redemptor Dreadnought. It has Redemptor Dreadnought and Dreadnought as keywords. We can't claim, well, the word is in another part of its keywords, so it should count, in which case Games Workshop would not be putting Dreadnought next to Redemptor Dreadnought as a keyword. What if we had a unit called Mounted Infantry? That name in the keywords would give it both mounted and the infantry keywords. Should the Trojan support vehicle have the support keyword because support as a word is in its keywords? Gotta get keywords right, because keywords are how a lot of stratagems and abilities and everything is triggered. Like, they're not a vehicle, but the frame keyword is on the Screamers in Chaos Demons, but not on the Screamers in Thousand Suns. Have I missed any problems, any errors at the start of 11th edition? Of course I have. Put the extra ones in the comments. Give this video a like. If it gets to 500 likes and there are enough additional errors, I will see if there is enough to make a part 2 for 11th edition. When Games Workshop, if Games Workshop gets around to fixing these, then we will have a great day of 40k.